Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Scarfey Spurs Talk page for a new podcast on a season review and what's next for Tottenham Hotspur. Going kind of deep into what's happened over this season, this topsy-turvy season for Tottenham. A lot of positives, a lot of negatives, but we're going to go through it all. With my two guests here, we've got Ian and we've got Justin. First of all, Ian, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing well.
You're in sunny Spain. How's everything for you after this this season of ups and downs?
Yeah, it's been an interesting few days to say the least. That news breaking at 5 p.m. your time, 6 p.m. ours, that Ange had gone, and with everything that's gone on since, with the new manager, the speculation about players, etc. That's pretty well preoccupied me for the last few days. No doubt it will for the next few. But yeah, the king is dead. Long live the king, I guess. That's what they say. So we move on and we fight another day.
Yeah, well, this is what you have with Tottenham. There's no break, is there? Come off of a season of just ups and downs, and we're straight into an off season, a transfer window of ups and downs again, aren't we? So loads to break down. Justin, how are you doing? Thank you for joining us again. And yeah, how have you been since the season's finished?
Yeah, not too bad. I think obviously a little bit sort of skeptical about what was to come next. Obviously, we're seeing more and more of that now. So we'll just have to see how it unfolds. This is Tottenham. It's always one of those things where it never sits still. So I think we're gonna see a few more twists and turns on the pitch, off the pitch, and to quote the man himself, it's just who we are, mate.
Yeah, we'll get on to all of the twists and turns that are happening in the transfer window, in the dugout, and we'll get on to all of that. But I want to start first of all going through the season. We're going to have a quick season review, cover some of the key moments in the season and how it derailed moments, but also how it made moments. We've had a very historic season at Tottenham Hotspur. And we'll get onto that. But I'm going to start with the Premier League season itself, finishing 17th place with 38 points, 11 wins, 5 draws and 22 losses with a -1 goal difference. I don't think any of us ever expected that at the start of the season. To be fair, none of us had probably expected us to be Europa League winners either. So, we went through it this season as Tottenham fans. We've seen so many great highs, but so many lows as well. How are you feeling, Justin, about just saying that 17th place with 38 points? If you're just hearing that and not knowing what's happened and everything that's going on, how do you feel about that 17th in the Premier League? I just never thought it would happen.
I think we've got to maybe take it back a little further from that. I know this is obviously a review of the season that we've just had, but I think the thing is this has been ongoing. And I think it was what was really telling from the statement that the club put out in terms of the amount of points that have been accrued, not just from that point, but in the previous year, in terms of after those 10 stunning games, at the beginning of last season to what was sort of then served up thereafter. It has been an ongoing decline and it needed a lot of work, which I think it was very telling that, and we could see the signs that where the club was heading to, from what Ange was putting out to what there is sort of now. You sort of look at it and you think, oh, should we really be surprised? Yes, 17th, completely unacceptable. There's no two ways about it. And I do feel that you look at that and it is completely unacceptable. I think the only thing I'm trying to sort of put into a bit of context is that we kind of saw the signs of this from the previous year. And I think between the manager and the board, I don't think a lot was done to really address it. And as we saw towards the end of the season, it wasn't even a priority anymore. Once we were safe, we could have just put 11 kids out. And they didn't. It wasn't a priority, which clearly, as we've discovered, was where differences really lied between the manager and the club. So unacceptable. I think we're just going to have to see how things pan out for next season going forward.
Yeah, definitely. I get what you're saying, Justin. I mean, if you really look at that transfer window we had, that summer transfer window, it was a lot of young players, a lot of prospects that were going to hopefully become better in the future. But it's just, in those moments, you're thinking, how is this going to set us up for this season going forward? You've got Archie Gray and Lucas Bergvall and these players that we're not expecting to pull up trees this season, maybe in the future for Tottenham. But bless you. We're going into, this season, you're thinking, 19-year-old, 18-year-old, we can't expect them to, change the tides for Tottenham. And again, it contributed, the lack of experience would have contributed to Tottenham finishing where they did. Ian, how do you feel about, 17th place? When I say 38, I mean, a lot of people always say, get to the 40-point mark and you'll stay up in the Premier League. Well, Tottenham didn't even reach that this year.
No, 40,
getting relegated, 40, but go on.
40 points is seen as the holy grail, but very few teams have gone down with 38 points, i.e. a point a game, or anything near it. I think West Ham, God knows how many years ago, were the last team to go down with more than 40 points. But we should never be in 17th place. Let's not kid ourselves. We should never be losing 22 games in a season. Yeah, we were decimated by injury, but it just wasn't good enough. And not only was the results bad, but some of the performances were equally turgid and what have you. I think when the dust settles, there's things you mentioned, other things I want to mention. One of the things is, we went out and bought all these kids, and that wasn't giving Ange a really good hand. Alan Hansen once famously said of Man United's class of 92, you win nothing with kids, and they went out and won the league. But they were kids that had been brought through Manchester United's academy. 5 of them, they knew each other, knew each other's games. They were obviously exceptionally high achieving players. We're bringing in, a player from Leeds United, a player from Sweden, or wherever he was playing at the time. Good players. I mean, the experience that Bergvall and particularly Gray got this year is going to put the club in great stead for the next, 10 years, however long we can keep them at the club. Because in particular, what I say about Gray in particular is that experience, what's the expression? Experience is what you get when you're looking for something else. And the fact that he's a midfield player, barely played in midfield, but played at fullback, played at centre half, and was really exceptional. Wherever he played. In fact, I saw an interview with Thomas Frank after one of I think it was the time we beat them at their place, when he said that with the two centre halves were Gray and Davis, and he was effusive in their praise of them and the way they played and the way we kept their forwards quiet. So it's one of those seasons where we'll talk about Ange. We'll maybe say Ange a bit unlucky because he maybe should have got a chance to develop it. But I don't agree with that, David. I think your first point, though, you made earlier was important. But let's come back to that. The fact that we have got such good young players coming through. And I remember Ange did give an interview and said that he doesn't want, hopes he keeps his job. This was months ago, because he doesn't want anybody else reaping the benefits of the players that he's coached and brought forward. And I can understand him saying that. I think the future is bright. I think the future is really bright. But there's no getting away from the fact that the league form, the league results were utterly pitiful. And much as I was disappointed that Ange lost his job, I don't think in the cold light of day anybody's genuinely surprised. And anybody, least of all him, can really complain, albeit I'd have liked to have seen him get a chance to see if he's learned enough to go into a third season with the Europa League behind him, and maybe with a couple of more experienced players, because that's what we've lacked, and that's where he was let down, in my view. He wasn't given enough experienced players to back up the young kids that he's got.
Yeah, I get what you mean, Ian. Again, it's just that transfer window. I think, a lot of us during it were thinking quite positively, but as soon as that window, slammed shut, we were all looking at it going, where was any of the experienced heads that we needed to come into this squad? We didn't really get any of that. But anyway, let's move on to some of the key games of the season. Now, for me, the first key game that I wanted to kind of highlight for me was when we beat Coventry 2-1 in the Cup. Now, as much as some people might look at it and go, you know what, it was a poor game, but we got through it. For me, that was the first time I started feeling like Ange wasn't the right manager. That was when I personally kind of started thinking, maybe we need to go a different route. Obviously, that doesn't happen. But just when I think back to that game, I think about how poor we were throughout the game. There was no real cohesion with the team. There was really, we looked like a championship team playing against a championship team. And, I thought we were going to be losing that game. Luckily, Jed Spence and I think it was Brennan Johnson scored the second goal. And we got through that game and got the winner in the last minute. But at that moment, for me, I really thought that, is Ange going to be the right guy to take us forward? I don't know how people. When was it for each of you? I mean, I know you said, Ian, that you felt like after the end of this season, you thought maybe he should have been given a bit more of a chance. But was there any moment during the season that you felt like, maybe Ange is not the right manager to take us forward?
I mean, if there was that eureka moment, I'm struggling with it. I think once you start to look, Coventry was certainly one, but I think there were other games where you just felt, has he got the wherewithal to make this work? But at the same time, remember, we got to the semi-finals of the League Cup, despite the fact we probably should have gone out at Coventry. And it might have been, if we'd have gone out at Coventry, he might have got bulleted then, because the performance there was abject and two very late goals and what have you. But we did get to the semi-final of the League Cup, and of course we were still in the Europa League. So much as you're looking at it and saying something's not right, as long as you're in with a chance of winning cups, and Tottenham's traditionally been a cup team, not a league team. We've only ever won the league twice, and certainly not in your lifetime or Justin's. So Justin, pardon the pun, Justin mine. So
well, let's keep going. I mean, there was. I kind of put these two together as some of the best games of the season in terms of the two Manchester clubs away from home. We beat Manchester United 3-0 away, beat Manchester City 4-0 away. And it was kind of thinking, okay, we're picking up some great results here. Although Manchester United obviously did not have the season they expected, and to a similar point, Manchester City weren't at the heights that they usually are. It was still two very big results for this Tottenham side, and very professional results as well. Getting two clean sheets away from home in Manchester was, definitely a lot of pride you can take from those results. So I guess there was a moment for me thinking, are we turning that corner? Is things moving forward? But then comes a massive game against Chelsea around December time where we lose 4-3. And there was that big decision of starting Van der Ven and Romero. Obviously, Tottenham suffered with a lot of injury issues this season. We've got to have some sympathy for that. You could say again, in that transfer window, did we have the adequate reserves to be able to come in when starters were injured? And I think a lot of us would agree that we didn't. But it was still a very risky decision from Ange and from the medical department to have Romero and Van der Ven start those two games. And obviously what come from that is both of them were out for a significant length of time afterwards. So Justin, going over those kind of games I've covered there, Coventry obviously before it, but Manchester United and Manchester City, two great results. And then kind of seeing Tottenham fall off again going into the new year. How were you feeling, with all of that during that time?
Well, I think to me, if you were to pick games that would seal somebody's fate, I think it would have to. I disagree slightly with those ones, because to me, I sort of, it's difficult because there was 22 of 22 of the defeats, so you're kind of struggling to think which
There's
ones
many to
really
go
sort
off
of,
of.
to go from. But there were two that I think really, to me, spelled real danger for him, which was the home defeat to Ipswich and the home defeat to Leicester. Two teams that hadn't, I mean, Ipswich hadn't even won a game all season, and we got them their first win. Leicester couldn't buy a win, couldn't score a goal, and they beat us 2-1, I think, or 2-0, I can't remember, and then proceeded not to win a game afterwards. So to me, I feel those are the ones that, if you were to sit there and say the wolves are out and they're baying for blood, I think that was it. I think the only things that were ever going to save any chance of saving him at that point was winning the Europa League, because it doesn't matter who you are. I mean, though the bottom three were the bottom three for a reason. They were the three worst teams in the league, but there was context. They had come up from the Championship. Okay, all three had come up from the Championship, and yet both Ipswich and Leicester came to Tottenham and got a victory, not a result, a victory. And it doesn't matter who you are, if you've got aspirations to take a club forward, that is not going to help your cause. It really isn't, And as I said, we stayed up because of the ineptitude of those three teams. That is why I think maybe the board have sort of looked at it, because I think the three that come up this time, I think, will be different. I do. I think Sunderland, and I think not Sunderland, Burnley and Leeds, I think, will different. I think it's going to be a struggle in terms of Sunderland, because they're selling one of their best players in Joe Bellingham. But I think that's where the concern is that I think Andrew's proving at that time he couldn't handle multiple competitions. And we are a club, as much as the trophy means so much to everybody, the bigger priorities are beyond that.
When you talk about Leicester, I mean, interestingly, you look at the first two away games of the season: Leicester away, Newcastle away. Leicester away, we played them off the park, 1-1. Could have lost that game late on. Newcastle away, I only saw part of that game because I was.
We dominated that game.
I was in the departure lounge at Toronto Airport, watching on the iPad that I'm streaming on now, and we should have won that game again by a hat load, and didn't. So you can even go back then and say, if you're dominating games and not winning them early doors, you've maybe got some problems.
But no, I mean, I completely agree with you, Justin, about, just the, those games obviously showing where Tottenham were. The frailties in Tottenham Hotspur, losing to those, Ipswich at home and Leicester at home, that should never have happened. And again, especially with how poor Ipswich and Leicester were this season, you're right to say that next season, if we were to play like this next season, we might not be this lucky that we were so clear of the relegation zone in the end, even whilst finishing 17th. We weren't really that close to it. But it's just, next season with Leeds in the Premier League again, with Burnley in the Premier League again, and how they dominated it, that they can be, professional outfits that are not going to get swept aside by the Premier League. Again, Sunderland, you're right, maybe have a bit of a tougher time. But again, Sunderland have grit, they have determination. They've been in the Premier League before, and that they could possibly create a stand to try and stay in the division. But it was very, very poor. And for me, one of the biggest games, it was one that you didn't mention, was Everton away when we lost 3-2. Again, maybe it obviously wasn't as damning a defeat in the end, but I remember at half time when we were 3-0 down to this Everton side after they'd been woeful for months, and just sitting there and thinking, this cannot go on. He tried a new system with a 5 at the back kind of thing, with, again, obviously with the injuries we had, but it was just an absolutely shocking display in that first half when we were 3-0 down. It could have been more, could have been 5, could have been 6 almost at half time. The second half, we showed a bit of fight, but it was too late. We were already 3-0 down to the team that I think at the time had some of the least amount of goals in the Premier League. And we'd given them 3 within 45 minutes. To switch it up quickly, let's go on a bit of a positive note. After that game, we played Elfsborg in the Europa League, obviously trying to get into that top, I think it was 8 teams to get automatically qualified, not having to go through the qualification round. And it was a game for the academy, wasn't it? With Dane Scarlett scoring, Damola Ajayi, and Mikey Moore getting his first goal. I think that was a magical moment for Tottenham Hotspur. I remember the scenes at the stadium, the importance of the game as well, because it wasn't, as much as Elfsborg maybe aren't the competition, aren't the best team, that moment, it was a big game. We needed to win it. And the players that stepped up were the youngsters. How did that feel, Justin, in that moment? What a game that was.
Yeah, it was. And I think it was something that you talk about moments where I think people looked at it and thought this could be a turning point. I kind of felt the same in a way, because I looked at the fact that was a tough game. We had to go up, we had to deliver a performance, and we were doing it with some unknowns in there, particularly Ajayi, particularly Mikey Moore. Obviously, we know a bit about Dane Scarlett, but he'd had a bit of a torrid time at Oxford United and a few loans that he's had. So it was a little bit, unsure of it, but they came out and they delivered. And I think the reason I say it could have, or it should have been a defining moment, was because what then happened after that was that those 3 players pretty much didn't see the light of day. I think they saw the odd bit, here or there, the odd fleeting moment. And I get what people say about, you want to protect these players, you don't want to throw them out there, put too much on them. But we see it with other clubs where if a player is good enough, they will put them out there. You look at Arsenal, as much as I hate to say it, but Lewis Skelly, Nwaneri, people like that. I mean, the obvious one is Lamine Yamal, and obviously these players are nowhere near that level. But the fact of it being is that we seem to have this nature that when a player is good enough, we'll almost try and over protect them. And you do think sometimes, do you know what? You just need to give them more and more of a chance, because there were times when, Son wasn't good enough, and, we just weren't going to play Werner, and, Johnson wasn't delivering, or Odegaard was injured, things like that. And you think, why couldn't we have given them a run in those games? And, to me, that I felt was a frustrating part, because I just felt there was a real moment there where there could have been a real reward given for the work that had been done. And it kind of felt like it just fell by the wayside. So, yeah, it could have been a defining moment. It was a good game in terms of those players. I think that they could have got more. I do, being brutally honest.
Yeah, no, I completely understand what you mean, Justin, and especially how the rest of the season went, where we did kind of start neglecting the Premier League season. Why weren't those youngsters then given a chance? They, as much as maybe you don't want to throw them into defeat after defeat, you're thinking that, these players are going to look at this opportunity and go, you know what, I'm going to try and grab this by the scruff of the neck and prove to everybody that it wasn't just a one-off game against Elfsborg. It was something that I can do on a regular basis. Obviously, we don't see these Tottenham players day in, day out. Obviously, the coaches do, and maybe they aren't ready for it. But again, that game against Elfsborg, you saw how desperate they were to win. Especially the Mikey Moore goal towards the end. He was desperate for it. He was the one. Yeah. He gave 110% in that moment, whilst everyone else around him wasn't. Elfsborg players looked defeated, and the Tottenham players were ready to just kind of let the game finish. But Mikey Moore was like, no, I'm getting my goal tonight. Obviously, I know Scarlett, I know Ajayi, growing up with them, they got their goals, and that's great. But it felt like he wanted that moment. He needed that moment. And the Tottenham fans were desperate for it too. Ian, how did you feel about that game? Again, for me, one of the moments of the season.
Well, I was there, and I came out of that ground feeling quite euphoric that, this club is in good hands. Forget Ange for a minute. But when you've got 3 kids playing, that their combined ages are less than mine. Sorry, I may sound like a total old man, but when three kids like that score and their combined ages are less than mine, and I'm thinking, this is brilliant. But you make a point about them not playing in the Premier League, and I think we'd have all liked to have seen them start or given a run, given the form that we were in, and given we were certainly by April focusing almost exclusively on the Europa League. But Elfsborg weren't very good. The other thing is, were they either into their close season or were just about to come out of it? And I think it showed with the way they played. I mean, first of all, they're a mid-table Swedish team, which is probably about a championship level team at best. They were also, if you were there, you'd have noticed that they visibly tired, which enabled Ajayi, if I pronounce that right, and Moore to score the goals. Certainly when Mikey Moore was running at them, he was absolutely full of legs and they had nothing to catch him. So I much as I came away euphoric thinking this club's in really, really good hands with the players going forward, I don't think we should go overboard with it. The quality of the opposition wasn't great, and not only it wasn't great, it wasn't that fit. But that said, I thought all the players showed enough for me to see. Let's give them some time, and it will be interesting to see what Thomas Frank does, who has no experience of managing a team with 3 competitive games every 8 days.
Yeah, obviously we will get onto all of that. But let's quickly, fall back down to the ground after that. Again, like you said, euphoric moment against Elfsborg. We then had a game later on in the season, a second leg in the Carabao Cup semi-final against Liverpool. Obviously, the first leg, I actually was very proud of the boys. I thought we were very competitive throughout the game. Obviously, Bergvall scoring his first goal for the club as well. But then Liverpool show us, who they are, show who the champions are, obviously, as they eventually go on to become. And they beat us 4-0 at Anfield. We limped out of the Carabao Cup semi-final. And obviously in that moment, I think a lot of Tottenham fans thought this was the trophy that we could realistically go for rather than the Europa League. I think going into the semi-final, especially being 1-0 up against Liverpool, we felt like we could maybe get over the line in this game and play either Newcastle or Arsenal. It was looking to be Newcastle in that final. But that was a very, very poor 90 minutes of football in a moment that you thought, this is such an important moment for Tottenham Hotspur, being in a semi-final of a big, competition again. Justin, how did you feel about that game? Again, really, really poor, again, limping out, really, as I would probably put it.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, realistically, the game should have meant more to us than to Liverpool. And you could see the passion and the desire in the first leg as to, that we battled and we fought and we got the victory, and it gave us a platform to go on. And I think these are where, to be fair, people, like myself, who thought Ange wasn't the right man for the job, I think this is where the evidence, you could add it to it, because going to a game like that, anybody knew you go toe to toe with Liverpool, you're gonna get absolutely mullered. And that's what happened. We just tried to almost match them, and it's just like, what are you doing? And when you consider some of the Europa League away performances, and I particularly revert back to the one at Frankfurt, because I think that was key as well. I genuinely didn't think we had a chance in that game, because I've seen a lot of the Bundesliga and I've seen a lot of Frankfurt, and they have some amazing players. Okay, they lost Mamouche to Man City, but they still had the goal threat of Ekitike. So I really did sit there and think that was going to be it. But what frustrated me is that was the performance we needed at Liverpool. A dogged performance, make it difficult, make them frustrated and things like that. And then, maybe even if you try and get a goal or something, we've shown we can do that. And to me, it just felt like we'd sent the players out there just on a hiding to nothing. We really, really did. We made it easy for them. And I think the comments, that came from the pundits and things like that about it's Tottenham, we knew what to expect. Yeah, they were right. And I think, that was a missed opportunity. Being brutally honest, I don't think we'd have beaten Newcastle in the final because they were just
No, probably
another
not.
level. They were, but it just was a shame we didn't we didn't even turn up at all in that game. I think if let's say we'd have turned up and we got done 2-0, 2 goals in the last 10 minutes, but we battled and we fought and things like that, I think you would have thought, well, okay, this is a team that has been extraordinary this year, and rightly so, is going to go on and win the league. But it just felt like we turned up, waited for them to humiliate us and go home. And again, like we said before, the people I felt sorry for were the fans who travelled all that way to watch that tripe, basically. And I think Ian probably is old enough to know what tripe is.
I've seen enough of it at Tottenham this season.
Yeah, that's fair enough. So yeah, disappointing, definitely.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think you're right in the way of you're right in the sense of we didn't really change some of these performances and these kind of the way that we went out into some of these games. You're right. A dogged performance against Liverpool is what we needed because we know we can't go toe to toe with them. We know that Liverpool against toe to toe with Liverpool is going to lead to a battering. So you're right, definitely. And I think the other thing that's kind of hard to see with Tottenham this season was a lot of the defeats were similar to that. It wasn't just that I know there was this big kind of stat coming out of, oh yeah, we lost games by 1 goal. We were losing games by 1 goal here and there. But a lot of the performances, it felt like we were losing games 4-5-0. We were being absolutely destroyed in most games. It didn't feel like we were close in a lot of games. It felt like the other team were just leaps and bounds above us. And, that's what you don't want to see. And that's what was so refreshing when we did get to those Europa League games. In the games where maybe, we're not going to absolutely demolish our opponents. Like Frankfurt were they had a great season in the Bundesliga. Of course, like you said, they did lose a couple of players in January, but they still had a solid team that finished in the Champions League places within Germany. And they'd made their home stadium a fortress. And we went there and go, we're not going to go toe to toe. We're going to be here and we're going to make it hard for you to break us down. And it was something that we hadn't seen a lot from Tottenham. Something that, I know David said it before in the chat about how previously Ange said, I'm not going to change. This is the way we play. And we finally saw some of that adaptation and it led to results. And that's what you need sometimes. But before we get on to probably what was the biggest game of the season, let's talk about another game against Chelsea, losing 1-0 away. And that moment with Ange kind of cupping his ears to the fans. Now, I know obviously now it won't mean anything. Obviously, we know Ange is gone. But it was a big moment in Tottenham's season and kind of summarised the division the club was in terms of the fan base, the ownership, the manager, even to the squad in general. Obviously, Tottenham fans were fuming with everything that was going on around the club in that moment. And it all kind of epitomised what Ange was doing, kind of holding his ears up to the fans and just showing the kind of complete divide with everything going on in Tottenham. Ian, how did you feel about just that moment of Ange and then, just how everything that was going on in that moment?
I always felt Ange was getting a lot of stick that wasn't always justified. But you do not react to supporters, to spectators. And I know a lot of the people that go away to every game, the Johnny Hammies of this world, who are regular YouTubers who pretty well goes to every game, says that for those fans, that was the end for them with Ange. That when he was acting like that, when they were giving him some stick for a goal that ended up being disallowed for a foul in midfield by Sarr, I think, that wasn't a good look. It wasn't a good look. But you look at Ange around that period and he starts to look gaunt. It looks to me like he's lost a fair bit of weight, and I suspect he's a man like me who enjoys his food, so it shows around his body. And he looked like he'd lost a lot of weight. And there is massive pressure. I mean, we shouldn't forget how much pressure these guys are in, or under 24/7, from the media, from the fans, from this, from that, the abuse they take. I mean, you're young, you guys are younger, but we never had social media. Yeah, you get some stick in the on the terraces. You'd maybe get someone send you an angry letter or whatever.
Something in the newspaper, maybe.
But you get nothing like this, where every Mr. Nobody with an anonymous account feels they've got the right to abuse, and this isn't just related to Angel football, has the right to abuse everybody and anybody in society that they choose. It's not a good look from a social media point of view. I mean, all I'll say is, my email, my Twitter handles, etc., reveal who I am. I won't say anything privately that I wouldn't say publicly, and vice versa. But yet, some of the abuse, and I would imagine that the stress got to him. When you think that it may be the biggest gig he ever gets. I mean, there's already a Premier League offer in for him. Talk that maybe Leeds want him. Interesting talk. Maybe he'll do a swap with Frank and go to Brentford. I think that will be risky for both those clubs, who maybe don't have the extra quality we have to get him out of jail. But we'll see. But yeah, it wasn't a good look. Wasn't clever. It's not a win-win, is it? It's a lose-lose.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, that's what obviously came with the digital age, unfortunately, with everybody having their opinion and a lot of hate getting sent to Ange Postecoglou. And we saw moments, not just in that game, didn't we? We saw it at Fulham, I think, when we lost 2-0, him having an altercation with a fan. There was always moments. Ange was never one to take the abuse. He always seemed to have something to say back. And, that's his character. That's fair enough. But you're right. In that moment, that was one that I just felt like, I don't understand what you're gaining from this. We have a moment against Chelsea. You've got all those fans going away, and it's not cheap to go see these Premier League games. It's not cheap to go see Tottenham. And you've gone to this game and you finally scored a goal, and your manager's kind of giving it to you, the ones who are there to support him. And it's a shame to see that moment, because it was, again, it could have, obviously it kind of didn't work out for him with the goal being disallowed anyway. But yeah. Anyway, we'll keep on going through.
There's someone in the chat who exemplifies exactly what I'm saying. If you look at the chat comments, I mean, that's exactly the kind of when you talk about libtards, that's the kind of what's the word I'm looking for? But put down you get from Trumpers, that it says all you need to know. And I'm not talking about a ban on freedom of speech. I'm talking about the right, or why people think they've got a right to abuse anybody under any circumstances behind an anonymous platform. That's nothing to do with freedom of speech. And I probably know your First Amendment better than you do. So give me a break. And I'm British. I'm not Spanish. Anyway, carry on.
You're always going to get trolls, unfortunately. It's just how the world works, isn't it? But again, they can always go fuck off themselves.
You can understand why eventually, most of them, I think, have got the patience of saints. I can understand why Ange got upset.
Yeah, 100%. And again, you're right. It's a tough gig, Tottenham Hotspur. You've got the eyes of thousands, almost millions on you. And you've got pundits kind of criticising you. I mean, Ange had many moments with Jamie Carragher and Gary Neville saying their two pieces about him. You've got fans, Tottenham fans and other fans all having their opinion on you. And it's just, it's definitely going to take its toll. But that's the job you sign up for with Tottenham Hotspur. You know what you're going to be, the kind of restraints you're going to be in, and the expectations you've got. So, but somehow, even throughout all of this season, all of the negatives, we make it to a European final, and we win it against Manchester United in Bilbao. One of the best moments I've ever had as a Tottenham fan in my lifetime. Obviously a very, very poor game of football. Don't get me wrong, but what a moment it was to finally win a trophy and see our team lift that trophy. I mean, an unbelievable moment for Heung-min Son, obviously captain of the club, been here for such a long time and has stayed loyal to the club all through those difficult moments, and finally got his reward that he deserved. And I think everyone wanted to see him have. And again, Ange kind of having his moment where everybody has said, you know, you're not going to be able to get the second seat. You're not going to be able to get the trophy in a second season, even though he always does, as he mentioned. And he did get it. He got that moment. And again, for me, being a Tottenham fan, I'm 23 years old. You know, when Tottenham won the Carling Cup at the time, I was 7, and I don't remember that. 7 years old, you know, 7-year-old Joe doesn't really know what was going on at the time. So I can look back at that and see, you know, the moment that Jonathan Woodgate scored in extra time, but I don't know what that feeling felt like in that moment as a 7-year-old. But now I finally got to experience it. I've got to experience the moment of winning a trophy, the moment of seeing that goal go in for Brennan Johnson and celebrating it. And, you know, it was a magical moment for so many Tottenham fans that I think we all deserved after, you know, years of just shit we've had to go through. Justin, you know, going on to that game, just what was, you know, I mean, obviously, again, a very poor game of football, but it ended in probably one of the biggest moments we've ever had, you know, especially in 17 years.
I think, I mean, yeah, as I said, I remember our last, you know, trophy success. I remember the one before that. I even remember the one before that, you know. So it wasn't a spectacular game. It didn't need to be. And I think I sort of looked at that game thinking to myself, no Spurs fan really cared about the performance. It was winning the game and bringing home the trophy. And I can guarantee you this, and this is where I think sometimes I just wanted to almost just grab Ange to say, what is wrong with doing this sometimes? Why is it that this type of performance, like we saw at Frankfurt, like we saw at Bodo Glimt, they weren't spectacular performances, but they got the job done? Had we done that at Liverpool away in the League Cup semi-final, had we done that away at Aston Villa in the FA Cup, had we done that in certain games in the Premier League when we were under the cosh, people wouldn't have cared. They wouldn't have turned around and they wouldn't have said, oh, that was rubbish, if we'd have won the game, you know. And this is where I think Ange Ball really just missed that, because I think if he'd have, not saying that every game had to be played in that way, you know, we had that under Mourinho, but if he'd have turned around and just occasionally, when you're being overrun, you know, and you're struggling a bit, just turning around, right, let's dig in, let's make it uncomfortable for 10, 15, 20 minutes, you know, let them have the ball. You know, we've seen this in terms of Nuno at Forest, where he would do that. You know, they had, I think, was it less than 30%. They beat us 2-1. You know, nobody is sitting there going, oh, well, you know, we played well, lost, but we played well, I'm happy with that. No, they are annoyed because we lost the game. And that is where, to me, I just felt that game itself gave me the greatest moment, you know, that in my Spurs history. You know, it's the first time that I've seen my club win a European trophy. That will never go. So to be honest, I don't care about the performance. I don't care how scrappy the goal was. You know, people turn around to me and go, it's not Brennan Johnson's goal. It could have come off his bum for all I cared. It could have literally have looped up off the air, off the back of Onana's head and in the goal. I would not have cared, because when all said and was done and the referee blew his whistle, what meant the most to me, and what meant to over those 200,000 fans that joined the parade, was the trophy. And that is where I think the biggest issue with Ange came, was the fact that sometimes that was what was needed. Ange Ball 2.0, or as someone called it, I think, Ange Wall. You know, we have Ange Ball and Ange Wall. Why could it not be that in certain games he could have shut up shop and just said, right, that's it? And I think that ultimately was his downfall. But in terms of that game itself, greatest moment of my Spurs supporting as a fan. Simple as that.
Yeah, no, but you're completely right, Justin, in that being the downfall of Andrew. I always kind of looked at it's about game state and it's about them, what's happening in that moment. I remember a game against Liverpool. I think I don't know what the score was in the end, 6-3 maybe. It was a very, very poor game, wasn't it? At home, we lost them in the league, and there was a moment just before half time. We scored. It was 2-1 Liverpool, I think, and there's a couple minutes left of the first half. And I think it's Jed Spence in that moment sprints up towards Trent, who's almost in his own quarter, in his own half, and then he lobs the ball over the top. Liverpool go through on and score, and they make it 3-1. And that moment, I was like, it's just about game state. In that moment, we've got a couple of minutes left of the first half, and just go back, get a bit deeper, and sit back and just survive until half time. We've got the momentum going into the second half, and maybe we can make it a game, get back on level terms. But instead, what happens is we play the same way with Ange ball. We say play the same way. We have to always play the same way. High line, push up, press high, and it leads to the downfall sometimes. And it's just sometimes changing whether in moments of the game. And that isn't what we saw enough of Ange. And obviously, when we did start to see it, it led to success and it led to us winning a trophy at the moment that all of us desperately wanted. But Ian, on to the final for you. How was it for you? What was that moment like? Just finally, hearing that fight. You were there at the game. What was that like in that moment? I mean, obviously, again, poor game of football, but we got over the line. We got the.
I mean, I'll make you guys jealous because my first. Funny enough, I was 7 when we won the FA Cup against Chelsea at Wembley in 1967, and I don't remember that either. So you're in good company, Justin. When you get to my age, you maybe don't remember yesterday as well as you think you do. But as I say, my ability to remember lyrics from the 1960s is in inverse proportion for me to remember what I went into the kitchen for. But so yeah, I mean, look, I was there in I wasn't there in 72, but I was there in 71 at Wembley when we won the League Cup. I was there in 73 when we won the League Cup. I was there in 81, 82. Well, I was 81, 82 when we won the FA Cup. I was at the Lane when we won the UEFA Cup in 84 and the FA Cup in 91. So I've been there, I've seen it, but it has been too long. And it's actually only when the final whistle went, and then some minutes later, Son is lifting the trophy, and you go, yeah, that's what it's like. That's exactly what it feels like. That's the feeling I remember, because there was a time we used to joke we should have a season ticket for Wembley because we had 2 FA Cup finals in 81, 2 FA Cup finals in 82, plus 2 charity shields. And it just felt like we were there. Yeah, you're a lucky man, David, because you're older than me. I don't remember that. But so we were at Wembley so often. As for Ange Ball, I don't think we ever really saw it. And I think there might come a point where Ange will say, I should have been truer to my beliefs, because it's not just the high line and what have you. When we started off against that game against Chelsea, we were down to 9 with Udogie and Romero being sent off, and we ended up, I think it was 4-1. I actually thought how we tried to play that game was fantastic, because you can either go 4-4-0 and just sit back and wait for the opposition to eventually score, or you can find a way to create them problems. And we actually caused them way more problems than they would ever have had if we'd have just gone 4-4-0 and waited for them to score, which they would have done. When you think as well, Sonny missed a 1-on-1, and Dyer had a very narrow offside goal disallowed for offside. That could have been completely different. But people then now forget in that first 20-25 minutes. Again, I think did we have a goal disallowed in the first half? We scored too early. I think we had another one disallowed. You know, we could have been 3 up in 15 minutes. And I think in us gone on and won that game 5-6-0, we'd have probably put Pochettino out of a job. But that first, if you remember that game, that was Ange ball. The ball going to the wings really early. The ball coming into the box really early. I saw it. I saw it when Ange did it for Celtic regularly, and it was a joy to behold. I don't think we really saw Ange ball after that. Yeah, we saw sort of hybrids with high lines and what have you, and yeah, teams did suss us out. But I think if Ange had been truer, and I think he needed better players. I think he needed faster, more direct wingers than Johnson and Son and even Taylor de Beer, Werner. I can understand why he signed Werner, by the way. I think Werner is exactly, if you look at the way his movement, the way he gets in behind fullbacks and what have you in his runs, are exactly what Ange wanted from Ange Ball and his players. The problem was that Werner's brain got him into the best positions, but his skill levels didn't get him to exploit them. But I understand exactly what he wanted from Werner, and I think he might look back and think, if I'd have had better players, or I'd have insisted on better players, it might have been different. I mean, because there is an element of Vindaloo football in him. You know, we're going to score one more than you.
Definitely.
But Ange Ball probably died that night in November 23 against Chelsea, and I don't think he ever really recovered. But what Bilbao showed, and when you look back on his CV, this man has a way of winning trophies. And the bottom line, we have had some very, very good managers who haven't won a trophy, including, you know, Mauricio Pochettino, who I've mentioned earlier. Yeah, everybody says it was great football. We had a great night in Madrid as well, apart from losing the game. The miracle of Amsterdam, etc. Running Leicester close in 2016. But the bottom line is he won nothing.
And we finally got over the line, didn't we? And what a moment it was.
And particularly for youngsters like you, that's what it feels like.
It feels like. I mean, I was an absolute nervous wreck watching it. I was watching it with my dad, who's been a Tottenham fan for a long, long time. He's he's had his season ticket at Tottenham when he used to live closer, and it was just, it was finally a moment for him, but also a moment for me to be able to share it with him. You know, being able to have experienced that.
One thing to add to that is you had to be there to feel the tension in the ground. You'd think how that sort of catharsis of winning a trophy for the first time in 17 years and not very much over the last 20 odd, the tension in the stadium, you could cut it, absolutely cut it with a knife.
No, I mean, I think I completely get that as well, because I mean, that whole line of "it's Tottenham," I think a lot of Tottenham fans kind of sit there and go, "It's Tottenham." You know, we sit there and we've experienced, kind of heartbreak for years and years, never getting over the line. And it's, I think we've all started to believe it in a certain extent that, are we ever going to be able to do it? I mean, that last 20 minutes, I could barely watch it. I was just so nervous thinking, we're going to let one in, especially how leaky our defence has been under Ange Postecoglou. It was always conceding many goals and outscoring our opponents. And it just felt like, is it going to be our day or not? And we were so lucky that it was. Obviously, you mentioned a couple of the players there this season, and we'll move on to that now. Moving on, some of the key players of the season, what we felt about their season themselves, and also kind of what is next for them, what's going to happen with them. But I kind of put together Van de Ven and Romero as a unit, because obviously they were both injured for many months. And when they were out,
I need to put a light on, Joseph.
That's okay, no worries, Ian. But Van de Ven and Romero were kind of a partnership throughout the season in terms of being off the pitch together and on the pitch together. It felt like it was usually the case. And with that, when they were together, we obviously looked like a completely different side as to when they weren't together. But the importance of them two was immeasurable for that final, especially. They were so important. And it's going to be very interesting to see what happens now. Obviously, none of us expect Van de Ven to go, but there obviously is many different rumours about Romero possibly leaving Tottenham. If that will be this season or if it will maybe be at the end of next year. But it will be a big loss. Obviously, I know so many people have their opinion on Romero, that he can be a bit rash, that he can be, sometimes, again, too unavailable in a sense. But when there's nothing to say that when Romero's on the pitch, he is one of the best players on the pitch usually in that game. And he has been key to Tottenham getting over the line and getting that trophy. So for me, it will be a sorry sight to see him leave, because again, I think he's an unbelievable defender, and it's going to be hard to replace him. Justin, what are you thinking about, Van de Ven and Romero as a partnership? Are you desperate to hold on to them, or are you thinking that maybe if one was to move on, we can replace them?
I think if done wisely, that then can be replaced. Look, we have to remember those two as a partnership were really, really good together. We saw it in the final. We've seen it in multiple games, how important they've been for us. But we also know that life goes on. And, we really need to be in a position now where the players at this club want to be here, that they're bought into the new project, and that, they can see what is hopefully going to come forward. So you do have to hope that, you hope that Romero will see what we're going to be building and what we're going to be looking at from here. But if he doesn't, then all the best to him. He's helped deliver us a trophy, and we look at, I've seen there's links with Nathan Collins, who's obviously at Brentford. I know there's links with Jared Branthwaite, and there's links with Mark Gahey. So 3 top quality centre backs that, are not as good, but have that potential. And I think that's going to be the key part, because we need to now, the dust has settled, Ange's gone. We know how much the players loved him. We know particularly how much Romero loved him. But the other side of it as well was how little he was fit. The amount of times that both of them were injured, and what we really now need are players that are going to be able to see, 35, 40, 50 games potentially, and I think that is something that might be an issue with regards to them. So they'd be good, and as I said, I think that is our best pairing. It always has been. But if Romero wants to go, hopefully the club will be clever, will replace him, and will bring in real quality with regards to that. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think if Romero wants, it'll be an interesting one, because obviously I think it's another year left on his deal in terms of, next summer he'll have, that'll be his final year. So we'd have to sell him to get anything for him at the end of next season. And obviously, are we in a position to kind of say no to a move now to keep him for this Champions League season that we're going to have? It will be very interesting to see. It will be very interesting to see what happens over.
Money on the table, because he's got 2 years left. I think if there is a 70 to 80 million pound offer, which is what I think it will have to be, I think it would have been less had we not won the, the trophy. But he's shown how important he is. He's also shown how good he is in these things, not just for us, but for Argentina. I think Atletico really want him. I think we're talking about big money, basically.
I think the problem with Romero, Joseph, is he plays when he wants, and that's not a compliment. If you, I don't know how much comes over on television, but when you're at the stadium and you see the way Romero is providing real leadership out there, and there was just no way in the world he wasn't keeping a clean sheet and winning that trophy. And he has the ability to be that good when he wants to be that good. The problem is he seems to want to be that good for Argentina and now and again for Tottenham. But there is a bottom line here. If you look at the stats, and I've seen slightly different variations of this, but like when Romero and that back five with Vicario, Porro, Romero, Van de Ven and Udogie, the record is something like, played 22, won 15 or 16, drawn 3, lost 2, or something ridiculously so good, it's actually league winning form. And if, first of all, we talk about the injuries, perhaps the medical department needs a lot of it's getting changes, and it needs.
Well, there was apparently there was apparently a big overhaul during the season, wasn't there? That most of them were fired, and they were kind of replacing them as we were going.
Yeah, well, it wouldn't surprise me if the people that that Frank brings in don't.
Yeah, I think there's going to be more.
Don't include medical people, because I don't remember Brentford having too many injuries, but I do remember them playing with a kind of high intensity that we would enjoy playing and you would enjoy watching. And look, with Romero. Who knows what goes on in that man's head or any player's head, but I got a feeling that if Thomas Frank can't say we can build something here, I'm going to make you my club captain, I'm going to build my defence around you, are you up for it? And if he is, then great. We've got Dan. So I'm a bit surprised at the Nathan Collins links, because when you look at even without Romero, we've got Danso, we've got Dragusin, we've got Vuskovic coming through. Phillips, I think, is right-footed as well. I don't know whether he's good enough. So the fact that we've got the Nathan Collins link would suggest that Romero may be on his way. And that would disappoint me, because I think, but the other aspect to that is maybe I'm wrong, but maybe looking at the way we play, and I think there's so much in this. Thomas Frank is very adaptable tactically, that I can't help thinking that going with a 3-4-3 or a 3-5-2 with those fullbacks really given license to push on, knowing that they've got a back three and probably at least one holding pivot, would give us a lot of flexibility going forward and a lot of energy going forward. Particularly with the fullbacks would go inside and out. There's links with Buemo,
yeah.
But although what I'm reading on the phone is that Man United's the most likely, but then there's talk that we're linked with Bournemouth's Semenyo tonight, so he's probably even an upgrade on Buemo. So that would suggest we are going for pace up front. The view is, I think we're keeping Tell again. He's someone with a bit of ability. I don't know whether that's to do with money from Bayern or whether it might be that some people want to send him back, but it might be that the manager actually rates him and thinks he can do something with him.
Yeah, of course. We'll get on to all of that anyway, but just to cover a couple other players that had, big seasons, important seasons at Tottenham. Again, I'll put together Bergvall and Gray. Obviously, did have different seasons, but both obviously young players coming in the summer, and obviously, not much expectation was put on them at the start of the season, but a lot was given to them by the end of the season in terms of how important they were to the squad. Obviously, Archie Gray more given his chances due to the injuries that happened with the back line. Archie Gray never really playing in the defensive midfield role that we all thought he was being signed to play, but playing at right back, at centre back, at left back at moments. And he just, again, versatile young player that we all had to kind of rely on in moments. And again, when I look at Archie Gray, I know a lot of people have sometimes said, especially towards the end of the season, have sat there and gone, he wasn't as terrific as we've all thought. But in my opinion, I thought he was incredible in the moments that he had to. He stepped up in the moments he had to, especially in moments that he'd never experienced before, in games that he'd never been a Premier League player, only playing in the Championship, and I think he adjusted really well. And Bergvall, I mean, he again from the start of the season, we saw moments where he really didn't look like he was ready for the step up, especially that Galatasaray game away. He just looked like a deer in headlights, but he came on leaps and bounds, going through the season. I think towards the end of the season, when we saw with Maddison, Kulusevski and Bergvall being out, Bergvall was a massive miss for that final. I think a lot of us felt that. We really desperately wanted him there. So it just shows the progress that he made. Johnson kind of going through a lot of question marks throughout the season. A lot of people saying, is he good enough? But kind of, you know, in a way, I mean, his numbers were incredible for Tottenham, and he really did contribute to getting us to that Europa League final, not just winning us the final. He really was important throughout the season.
Can I put something in there? Because Bissouma takes an awful lot of stick. Don't underestimate how well Bissouma stepped up those last few games of the season, particularly in the Europa League when Bergvall was injured. I mean, he was my man of the match, and he was a good few other men of the match against Man United. I thought he was exceptional. I mean, I agree that Bergvall was a big miss. He was my player of the season. But I thought Bissouma, particularly in the final, was absolutely outstanding.
Yeah, definitely. And then the other player I kind of had on there was Jed Spence. Again, not a lot of expectation was there for him at the start of the season, but again, he proved that he is a Premier League footballer. He proved that he can be a rotational option at Tottenham. And to be fair, for me, safe to say, if for any reason Porro was to go, I'm happy seeing Spence be the starter for Tottenham next season if that was the case. And the other player I wrote down was Tell. Obviously, not having the best kind of, you know, obviously came into a really difficult position when he joined in January, but obviously there are links to him possibly joining us back, being a permanent player. I mean, Tottenham still seem to I mean, I saw a post today about the players who are playing in the under-21s championships, and they put Tell in that list of Tottenham players. So, you know, it's an interesting one where, are we going to trigger that buy clause? Are we going to make a different kind of, are we going to negotiate a fee? But that will be all interesting to see. Before we finish, we're going to move on to just a couple feelings around, you know, this transfer window and going into next season. Obviously, the big news, obviously, Ange Postecoglou being sacked, and it looks like Thomas Frank is going to be coming in. I think we're all here kind of thinking that it is the right appointment for what Tottenham have at the moment at their disposal. It looks like Frank will be the manager coming in from everything we're seeing online. It looks like it's almost confirmed. And he is going to come with some new signings. You know, we obviously have those links with Mbeumo, with him being from Brentford too. But obviously, yeah, there's the possibility that Manchester United still make that signing. Again, and like you said before, you know, Branthwaite, possible signing in the future. Mark Guehi, again, Matthias Tell. We don't really know what's going to happen there. For you, Justin, who would be like your, you know, dream signing just throughout this summer? Who do you think would be perfect for this Thomas Frank's Tottenham?
Oh, I mean, I think to be fair, we need to sort of look at it in terms of what was really missing, you know, in terms of what we've got now. I mean, I think if the defence stays as it is, I don't then see that being a major issue. Obviously, if Romero goes, then I think, you know, he'd have to be replaced. For me, I think it would probably, the one that would stand out, the one that if somebody said to me, okay, money's not an object, got to be realistic in terms of Spurs, but money's not an object in terms of transfer fee, who would I go for? I think it'd have to be Eze, because the versatility of the player, you know, we've seen him step up. We've seen him progress under this Palace team. We've seen that he can play on the left, on the right, during the middle. I mean, some of the stuff he did, and even in the FA Cup final, was just, you know, just breathtaking. And when you look at as well the goal that he scored in that final, which was something that's been missing from his game. I sat there and I always had my reservations because I thought it's just too many flicks and tricks and not much else substance. But he seems to have added that to his game. And I just feel whether it be him or whether it be Adam Wharton, you know, as like a number 6, something we have really missed, either of those would be, I think Eze would be the one that would excite me. Wharton would be the one that's more practical. So I know you said one, and if I had to pick one, it would be Eze, because I think that would just be, that would take to a new level, definitely.
Yeah, no, I get that. I mean, Eze, I mean, forever linked with Tottenham, it feels like, for the last couple of years. And it's one that feels like kind of a match made in heaven, doesn't it? It feels just like Eze's the type of Tottenham player that we've all kind of missed for a while, since kind of Son hasn't, obviously I'm not comparing him to Son, but Son kind of gave us some of those sparks of magic in moments, and we haven't seen that enough this season We haven't seen that enough for a couple of seasons now. Maybe Eze would bring that back to Tottenham. For me, I agree. I think we need a 6 desperately. Whether that be someone like Wharton, however, I feel like the fee is going to be astronomical if they were to look to sell him. I love the idea of possibly looking at João Paulinho from Bayern Munich. I thought he was excellent when he was at Fulham, and he hasn't really made that position his at Bayern Munich. It looks like there is rumours he could leave. And then, it's a winger. It's an attacking midfielder possibly. I love the idea of pushing the boat out and trying to look at Xavi Simons. I think he's been excellent at Leipzig, and obviously them not having any European football going into next season is a big miss for them. Obviously, there's links to them kind of getting raided. So there's many options Tottenham could look at. Whether they do look at them is another question. Ian, what would be your dream signing if there was one?
Edsy, every time. Particularly when I talked about Thomas Frank's tactical acumen and the way he sets up, whether you play 3-4-3 and he plays the left side of a front, whether he plays 4-3-3 and plays left side of a front, whether he plays 4-2-3-1 and plays the left side of the three backing up the one man. It's Edsy every time, and I think Sonny's had his day. He's not going to get any better. If we could get money and good money in for Sonny, brutal though it may sound, and bring in Edsy, I think that would be fantastic business. I think we need some other players. I mean, I gather Frank's a big fan of Richarlison, but the problem is Richarlison's made of glass. I think if we could lose Richarlison and bring in another really good centre forward as backup or to compete with Solanke, we maybe have enough cover on the right-hand side. I'd be interested to see what he makes of Johnson. He tried to sign Johnson, but Johnson doesn't have that pace and attacking of fullbacks the way that I think Thomas Frank would have liked. So whether that's something he can develop, he's still got Odebear, we got Yang. Don't know what will happen with Yang, but I think that left-hand side, if we could get Edsy in, that would be the ideal signing for me. Yeah, we need others. I think we need others, but Edsy would be ideal.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Jay here. Eze or Brian Mbeumo, I think Mbeumo is excellent. It's unbelievable, and he works so well in this Thomas Frank system. I think he would go on leaps and bounds at Tottenham. And the age profile, the ability he has, the speed he has, the physical ability he has it's unbelievable. So yeah, definitely many options. We'll see what happens in the coming weeks, coming months. I'm looking to do a kind of my ideal Tottenham transfer window, which I'm hoping to upload with the channel. So hopefully keep your eyes peeled for that. Last question for both of you around, just the upcoming season. Next season we've got a Super Cup versus PSG. We've got the Champions League. Obviously a lot of changes at Tottenham with, back from changes in terms of the dugout, but also at the top with Vinay coming in as the new CEO. We've obviously seen Donna Cullen leave. There's obviously loads of rumours around possible new ownership. If any of those are true, who knows? But there's a lot of rumours and a lot of things. But what are your expectations for next season? Obviously, I know it's a difficult question, but what are your expectations going into it? Do you think just stable mid-table finish for Frank in his first season, or are you setting your aim or your aims a lot higher? Justin, I'll come to you first.
Minimum top 6. It has to be. I mean, I get that he's finished 9th, 10th, that sort of area for Brentford, but he's coming into a bigger beast, and I don't think he'd be able to get away with a mid-table finish. I think we need to be getting back to where we were before. We've got a better squad than where we were. I think, if we add the right, players to it, which I think obviously they've got to look at that and back him on this, because they're paying 10 million quid to get him through the door. It would seem to be very, daft to bring this guy in, not give him the players he wants, and then sack him halfway through a season. It just wouldn't make any sense. So to me, I sort of sit there and think we should be at least minimum top 6, a good cup run, whether it be going long in the Champions League or whether it be, the League Cup, FA Cup. I think that has to go with it. So if they get this right, and obviously we know there's a lot more changes coming, for me, the minimum has to be top 6 and a decent cup run.
Okay, and Ian, what are your expectations going into it?
The ownership issue is another show. because
100%.
with Charrington on the board running we don't know, and we don't know if Staveley's got a consortium out there, and we don't know whether at the moment we might be spending a lot of money we're pretending not to have, because it's not a publicly quoted company, so we don't need to be going out and saying we're in negotiations with this consortium or that, so we might be spending money we haven't got yet, but we are getting. But no, I'm probably with Justin. The worry for me about Frank is he's not won anything. He's used to finishing mid-table. Yeah, I know it's Brentford, but he's used to finishing mid-table. He's never competed. The statement when they sacked Ange was, we need someone we want to be able to compete on multiple fronts. And you employ a manager who's never had to compete on multiple fronts. Now, I'm happy we're getting him. Glasner would have been my number 1, number 2, and number 3 choice, because I think he fits the profile better than Frank. But if Frank's the man, but he needs to understand what the expectations are. He's an intelligent man. I'm sure he does. That the expectations at Tottenham are way bigger than they are at Brentford. And when he sees the facilities and he's seen the stadium, so he knows exactly what's expected. But I would be looking, certainly top 6, European qualification on league position and a cup. I think he's got to get the players as well will want to win more. Once you get that taste of success, you want it. And I would expect those players to really want to go out and win another cup. If you finish 6th and won the League Cup, I think that would be a really good start. But one word of warning, if you look at his first 8-10, I think he won 2 of his first 8 games at something at Bromby, and he didn't win any of his first 10 at Brentford. It's something like that. It's a horrific early record before he turned it round. He won't have that time at Tottenham. If it's really bad, we're out the League Cup, struggling in 14th or 15th, and lost our first 2 Champions League matches. People will be
they'll be baying for blood. Yeah,
100%.
So Thomas Frank has to hit the ground running.
100%. I mean, with everything that's happened, with Ange going, and a lot of people, showing their unhappiness with that, especially even players coming out and saying that, I mean, obviously not technically saying it, but showing their appreciation for Ange. It's going to be a big job for Thomas Frank, but hopefully he's up to it. But again, thank you everyone for watching. Thank you everyone. Thank you for Justin and Ian for joining me. Before we do go, I want to say, Ian, where can people find you and find your content?
You can. Well, you can follow me at Shaggy1712 on X. I'm one of the owners of Spurs Diehards TTID. We go out 3 times a week in the season anyway, on a Tuesday at 9 o'clock. Friday at 10 o'clock, tapping into some of our overseas markets, and I host a show at 9 o'clock on a Sunday night. I know David's been in the chat. David's a regular contributor to that, so thank you, David. So that's our show. That's a show that's growing really fast. So we're really pleased with what we're achieving. So that's where I can be found.
That's great to hear, Ian. And Justin, where could people find you?
Yeah, I mean, I've started doing a few video shorts for Harry's channel, and obviously just regularly appearing on here, and kind of mainly also on Twitter as well. I'm happy if people want to have a comment or a discussion or things like that. And I'll just sort of get involved in those things to try and help out. I know I've got a few things I've spoken to Harry about for next season. So yeah, as I say, it'll be very interesting. So thank you for having us on.
Yeah,
absolutely. Thank you for joining me. And again, obviously, we're all, becoming regulars on the channel. Again, please do follow. I mean, there's a load of amazing people joining us each week and doing different content. So please do follow everyone, as well as myself, Joseph THFC on X. I'd really appreciate that. But again, thank you all for joining us. Thank you for taking the time, guys, to come on here and have your say about what was a historic season for Tottenham Hotspur. But hopefully we'll be getting more of that going into next season, and most likely with Thomas Frank. But we'll get on to all of that in the coming weeks. Thank you all. Have a good rest of your night.
Thank you.